What is the worth of my person? What is the value of my life for others? Definitions are meaningfully formed as a result of experience. A definition really should be a verbal summary of an experience. Your unchanging values must represent your experiences, and when they are part of your personal experiences, then you will realize that unchanging values are so crucial in man's relationship with man and in his relationship with the Supreme. The despair that paralyzes man into inaction is a challenge posed by association with large numbers. Open the papers and you hear about millions of undernourished children, millions who are unemployed, the increasing drug menace, the latest hot news about AIDS, corruption, and what have you. Such despair rejects the possibility of hope. There are definite instances of change, of honest and unselfish conduct, which has brought hope. Individual change is the springboard for hope. But in this skeptical and cynical day, people conclude that such instances are rare. It is only one case. Perhaps such a reply may be regarded as realistic or pragmatic. However, I believe this represents thinking in the wrong perspective, in terms which simply do not provide for hope, change, or growth. History has rarely been changed by majority vote. Most far-reaching changes have been the sustained work of impassioned, persevering individuals and small groups. Civilization, according to historian Arnold Toynbee, comes from creative minorities. Faith and hope must remain the inspiration behind unchanging values, and my personal experience remains the reality which validates it for me. Anyone can have a part in such a moral force. We are free to choose values inspired either by our conscience or by our own selfishness, but we are never free to avoid the consequences of that choice. The rules of gravity are as real as the consequences otherwise. The anchor for our lives remains those values which we individually accept as unchanging values. They provide a sense of vision and perspective much needed as we face the challenges and changes ahead. As Khalil Gibran says, the teacher gives not of his wisdom, but rather of his faith and his lovingness. If he is indeed wise, he does not bid you enter the house of his wisdom, but rather leads you to the threshold of your own mind. I trust this afternoon, through the experiences that have been shared, they will be of some help to all of you in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haridas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to much. We have heard many express their convictions and experiences in relation to the theme. May I now call for a minute or two of silence for each one to reflect on all that has been said, but also to seek from within what our inner voice may have to tell us. So shall we be silent for a minute?
Yang amat berbahagia, Tan Sri Ahmad Nordin Zakaria, Mr. Joachim Ng, and Dr. V.G. Panikkar. Friends, we are very privileged this afternoon to have with us three eminent citizens of Malaysia to give us three different perspectives on the theme. Tan Sri Ahmad Nordin has very kindly accepted to speak from a public accountability, social responsibility perspective on the theme Unchanging Values in a Changing Society. Joachim Ng, who is a newspaper editor, known for his columns on interfaith, will speak from an interfaith perspective. And finally, we have Dr. V.G. Panikkar, popularly known as the radio doctor, to speak from a medical and health perspective. Time is catching on us. I had, when I'd spoken to them, said that they will have 20 minutes each. I request for their forgiveness in that I will have to limit it to 15 minutes each now. And without further ado, may I call upon Yang Amat Berbahagia, Tan Sri Ahmad Nordin, to start off.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, since I've been warned not to exceed time allotted to me, I must stick to my note very closely because I've got a very bad habit of diverting from the main theme of the subject. It is a privilege for me to join my other two colleagues on this panel. The topic I have been asked to discuss is social responsibility and public accountability. Well, it is a very apt topic to me in the context of the general theme of your meeting this afternoon, which is unchanging values in a changing society. Well, as I guess it right, that the expression unchanging values refer to the matter in the context of public morality. That is, the ideals and values by which every one of us strive to live and conduct ourselves in our relationship with others. I wish I could sing a song as well as speak, like what Miss Julie just now. If I could, I would be singing, and the others can talk. But since I've been asked to discuss on this subject, I'll try to do it within the time allotted. I came across this movement, moral rearmament, more than 20 years ago, and from no less than a person who was one of the founders, the late Datuk Sir Mahmud bin Mat, who was at one time a speaker to Dewan Rakyat, or at the time the Legislative Council of Malaya. And I thought at the time I would like to practice moral rearmament rather than join the movement, because in my career as a public servant of the old school, there is a lot to be done in order to put into practice what you think of moral values. Now, as an auditor, or rather correctly, as a former auditor in the government, it was my duty to find out, and where possible to ascertain whether public spending conforms to the generally accepted standards of public morality. And that is easier said than done. However, the common sense yardstick to measure is whether both the means and the ends of spending justify the amount of money that we are given in order to provide benefit. And that is always the objective of spending in government, to provide the greatest benefit to the greatest possible number. As I said, it is easier said than done in most situations. Now, coming back to the topic itself, the terms responsibility and accountability, as mentioned in your general theme or in my topic, are, to my mind, synonymous in a general sense. Responsible, says the Oxford English Dictionary, means liable to be called to account or to answer to somebody for something done. There is, however, some difference in that term if compared with the term accountability, in the sense that accountable has a certain technical connotation, particularly in relation to financial responsibility. A person is said to be responsible for the consequences of his action, whether such action is related to a duty imposed on him or not. But a person is accountable for his action if it concerns a duty or something entrusted to him officially or in some formal manner. However, in the moral sense, every sane person is accountable to his Creator, to Allah, or to God Almighty. An insane person, I suppose, cannot be blamed, but I think we are all sane here. In Islam, it is an article of faith for every Muslim to believe in the next world, and that everyone in the day of judgment, on the day of judgment, will be brought for trial and receive judgment of Allah for his deeds and misdeeds on earth. Each will be shown his or her books of accounts, the credits and debits in his life, as it were, and will be questioned on every item recorded in this book of accounts of the various crimes or offenses for which a person will be tried on that day are those relating to serious crimes, but in the context of morality, I think what we are concerned with now, those relating to the infringement of personal or property rights of others, or damaging other people's names. These include frauds, non-payment of debts, thefts, libel, false accusations, perjury, etc., apart from other serious crimes like murder or fornication or whatever it is. A possible punishment for infringement of right is that the injured party will be compensated by the transfer in his favor the value of the good deeds done by the wrongdoer on the world, in the world, and on earth, if there is any good deed. Otherwise, the wrongdoer will have to bear the sins of the injured party instead. Now that, I think, is a very sad situation when you have to bear the consequences of other people's action. In accounting jargon, this transfer is termed as adjustments to balance the accounts between the parties concerned. But there is no way of cancelling the adjustments because God Himself decrees as such. Now I feel that I should mention this religious aspect or the need for a Muslim to practice moral discipline as enjoined in the Holy Quran, as I want to emphasize the point that accountability as part of that discipline is both a religious duty commanded by God Himself as well as a legal duty imposed by law. To practice and keep moral discipline is a divine commandment. There are numerous verses in the Holy Quran, reminding mankind to be good, to do good, to avoid doing evil, and to be righteous in relations with others. And this injunction or commandment is condensed in Arabic in just one word, taqwa, T-A-Q-W-A. And every Muslim is enjoined to study the Quran and the Hadith in order to learn the implication of taqwa and to conduct himself accordingly. Nowadays, we have to rely more and more on statute laws to enforce the principle of public accountability. I'm nervous of your time. It looks as though individuals have become increasingly less concerned about their moral responsibility to God and society. To them, the day of divine judgment is too far remote to worry about. But to me, it is coming nearer, and to those who are of my age. To them, to these people, the day of divine judgment, as I said just now, is not of consequence for the moment. What is perhaps more important and more urgent to them is to seek material wealth in any manner possible, so long as one can avoid being caught by the law. And when we have time, then we can remember about divine commandments. You may remind such people about ethical and moral standards. They will likely say, moral standards are meant for the squeamish or for members of the MRA movement. And ethical standards are for the professionals who may want to stick to their profession and play safe. We have the Constitution and a host of laws to control public and private business activities. Controls are necessary for various reasons: economic, political, security, social, and other reasons, in order to protect public interests or to meet national needs. Controls are also designed to provide the necessary checks and balances, and they also serve to make persons exercising authority, persons with power, make them more accountable to higher levels in the hierarchy of power. Examples of such controls are found in various laws, particularly the company laws, the banking laws, statute laws to control government operations, so that government servants conform to the requirements of the federal or state constitution. If we go by the laws in existence at the moment, we should expect that the standards of accountability in government and corporate businesses are getting better all around. Unfortunately, in the recent past, the principle of accountability has been thrown overboard in certain instances. Now, what has gone wrong? In my view, our development processes have produced too many situations where conflicts of interest arise, so that the enforcement of public accountability in some cases has become a dilemma for those involved in the enforcement processes. In such an environment, the people who are not squeamish about moral responsibility and ethical values tend to take advantage of any situation where political patronage or paternalism can be sought. Now, the long-term effect of such a situation is that, to my mind, respect for the law will erode in the public mind. It is saddening For it saddens me to contemplate that there is a syndrome of indifference to changing values in public morality. The principle of public accountability, which imposes moral duty and obligations upon an individual to explain or give reasons for any act done or not done, or any failure, should not be allowed to become as an abstract philosophical doctrine. The accounting and the legal professions, for example, have developed comprehensive ethical codes and standards of compliance to regulate the respective professions. The accounting and auditing standards, for example, do provide practical mechanism for enhancing standards of behavior in financial dealings and for ensuring disclosure of all financial transactions in order to help the auditors in the detection of frauds or mismanagement. The idea behind this is that the fear of disclosure of what a person has done in using other people's money entrusted to him should make that person, if he has a conscience or has a sense of shame, should make him afraid to lose the confidence placed in him, and should make him exercise more care and prudence in his work and avoid any dubious or fraudulent means to accomplish his ends. In other words, a person who has attained a certain position of authority and responsibility should have the fear of God in his conscience. In a parliamentary system of government where the legislature approves the laws before they can be enforced, including the law relating to spending of money, collection of revenue, there is appointed in every life of parliament a standing committee, which we call Public Accounts Committee, consisting of members of parliament who are not in the government. The function of this committee is to examine the government accounts together with the auditor's report. The members in this committee may question public officers on any items of public expenditure, and the latter, that is, the government officers, are bound to explain their part in that spending and to supply additional information. This process came about because it was thought in England, at least, where our constitution is modeled, it was thought that an inquiry by a committee of members of parliament about public spending would put the fear of God in the minds of those responsible, including the minds of politicians in government. Unfortunately, however, this institution, the institution of inquiry by the Public Account Committee, has lost its charm as a mechanism for enhancing public accountability, because there are various constraints built in the system to make it less and less effective. In conclusion, it seems to me that there is a dire need for the various religious groups to intensify their efforts in instilling in the minds of their followers such values as integrity, righteousness, truthfulness, honesty, and other good moral virtues. I believe that the MRA movement can play on a constructive role in bringing together people of different communities to exchange views on how best to bring about awareness of the importance of promoting standards of morality among the people, particularly of the younger generation, who will be our leaders of tomorrow. I think the concept and principle of accountability and social responsibility is has its roots in the various religious doctrines. Moral upliftment is the long-term cure for most of our social ills. May your efforts prosper for the good of our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia, Tan Sri Ahmad Nordin. We want to say, however, that over the last months, as we have read the newspapers and followed through the events of this country, we have been very inspired very often by the stand that you have taken on various issues relating both to public accountability, the Freedom of Information Act that you spearheaded in the nation. And we want to say that in this context, we would like to continue to play a role and seek your advice on the issues that face our nation. Now I have very great pleasure in calling upon the second panelist, none other than the famous Mr. Joachim Ng. For those who follow the Sunday Mail and read the Interfaith column, you will have heard letters written to the editor supporting his cause and criticizing his views. At the same time, no that Joachim Ng brings into the Interfaith column. And we are therefore very privileged this afternoon to have him speak to us from an interfaith perspective.
Datuk Patuga, Tan Sri, ladies and gentlemen. The first time Haridas and I had a chat about 2 years ago, I thought here. That's because I had this illusion that MRA was some form of MRT, mass rapid transit. Since that time, I have been a moral supporter of MRA, and I'm grateful to Haridas and the other organizers for inviting me to explain the interfaith concept of values. I'm going to divide my talk into 3 sections. A, what is interfaith? B, the origin of interfaith. And C, the application of interfaith to our theme today. A, what is interfaith? Faith says that all religions are one in essence, but different in forms. There is unity at the center and diversity at the periphery. Interfaith uses nature as a model for its concept of unity in diversity. Our most famous example is that of a diamond and a pencil. Now, a pencil, the tip of the pencil which you use to write, is called the lead. That comes from graphite. Now, there's a world of difference between a diamond and a graphite here. Diamond is so hard. Graphite is so soft. Diamond is so expensive. Graphite is so cheap. Diamond is held in high esteem, but nobody thinks of the lowly pencil. But you look inside the diamond, it is composed of only one element, carbon. It is 100% carbon. You look inside the graphite, it is also composed of only one element, carbon. 100% carbon. The whole of nature is filled with identical examples of unity in the essence, unity in the center, but differences at the periphery. Interfaith says there are no fundamental differences between one religion and another, since fundamentally all religions are one in essence. The truth is one, and therefore it is exactly the same truth embodied in all scriptures. Interfaith says that the differences between one religion and another are the result of differences in the way the truth is expressed and applied in various cultures around the world, or even within the same culture in different historical eras. Interfaith says that the differences between one religion and another are complementary, like male and female, rather than contradictory. And these differences are not in opposition to each other. We can and should make use of these differences to create a global civilization. In our example of the diamond and graphite, they are not the same in structure because they have different functions to serve. The diamond is the hardest of substances, and we can use it to cut glass, but we can't use it to write on paper. Graphite is the softest of elements, of substances, and we can use it because of its softness to write and to draw, but we can't use it to cut glass. So, in the same way, the varieties of religious traditions have given us a very rich set of tools in which to build a global civilization founded on spiritual values. The goal of interfaith is to bring all the world religions together so that they form a Barisan International, which becomes the common platform on which we shall build a global civilization ruled by divine law. The way of thinking of an interfaith believer can be illustrated by means of the light bulb diagram. Imagine that all these are light bulbs. The source of light is the same right here. And you can say the same for all these bulbs here. They're all different bulbs, but the source of light is exactly the same. Be the origin of interfaith. I shall go very fast on the origin because I've lost 5 minutes. Interfaith is a theme that runs through the scriptures of all religions. Every scripture consists of only a few basic themes. And these basic themes are exactly the same in every scripture. Interfaith is one of these basic themes. Let me stress that interfaith is an orthodox teaching, as it is deeply rooted in the tradition of every scripture. Besides being an essential element of all the Sino-Indian religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Taoism, Confucianism, etc., interfaith is also an essential part of the Christian apostolic tradition and the Islamic Sufi tradition. C. Application of interfaith. MRA has laid down 4 absolute standards of morality: purity, honesty, love, and unselfishness. All religious believers accept the need for a code of morality, such as these 4 standards. But how many of us are aware that our capacity to be pure, honest, unselfish, and loving depends on whether we are sectarian believers or interfaith believers? Let me illustrate how important this is by means of the light bulb diagram again. If you are a sectarian believer, this is what happens. We look below this is the mental block. You look below this mental block, this is all you can see. This is your own religion. You can't see the unity of religions. You can't even see the light in other religions. You see only the light in your own religion because of this mental block that you have. You remove the mental block, and this is what you see. Now you see the unity of all religions. So it makes a very great difference in your practice of morality, as I shall come to later. I would like to stress that a sectarian believer judges everything from the standpoint of his own perspective. But an interfaith believer aims for a unified vision which transcends the partial viewpoints. I do not say that interfaith believers necessarily manage to do this. We have our human feelings, but this is the goal. This is the ideal. Let us take 3 of these 4 moral standards and discuss them one by one using actual examples. Let's take purity. To be pure means to be free from defilements. A sectarian believer is likely to interpret this to mean that he should not get involved in the teachings or activities of other religions, as this involvement may dilute the purity of his faith. Take, for instance, a Christian who is baptized and a Muslim who is circumcised. A Christian thinks that his baptism sets him apart from others, and a Muslim thinks that his circumcision sets him apart from others. But the interfaith outlook does not see these 2 rituals as opposed to each other. We see it as equally valid. That's because there is a point of unity here. The point of unity is that both circumcision and baptism are symbolic rituals which serve exactly the same function, to remind the Jew, Muslim, or Christian that he must be pure in heart and mind. The symbolic meaning of circumcision is pointed out in the Old Testament. This is what it says: circumcise yourselves to the Lord and take away the foreskins of your hearts. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 4. The symbolic meaning of baptism is pointed out in the Quran. Quote, our religion is the baptism of God, and who can baptize better than God? And it is He whom we worship. Surah verse 2, chapter 2, verse 138. From this example, you can see that our concept of purity is very much determined by our outlook. If we have a sectarian outlook, even the moral value of purity becomes polluted by our sectarianism. Honesty. Have you ever asked yourself how honest everyone really is? The most important aspect of honesty is the way we earn our living. How honest are we as employees or businessmen? Let me take the classic example of the vegetable farmers in Cameron Highlands. The high level of pesticides in those vegetables is one of the most serious scandals in our food industry. And it was allowed to go on for so long because nobody involved in the food industry was prepared to admit that his way of making a living is dishonest. Take the farmer. As far as he is concerned, he's making an honest living because he doesn't overcharge you in a market, nor does he give you less than what you pay for. He's honest. Take the pesticide salesman. As far as he is concerned, he's making an honest living because he's giving the farmer what he wants. A pesticide strong enough to kill all the pests. He's not overcharging the farmer, and he is not selling an inferior pesticide. Take the civil servant in the agriculture ministry who is supposed to supervise the industry. Long before the scandal broke out, the civil servants already knew about the high level of pesticides. But they closed an eye to this because their job is to protect the interests of the farmers. As far as the civil servants were concerned, they had made an honest living because by their silence, they ensured that the farmers continued to enjoy the false confidence of the customers like you and I in the marketplace. The farmer, the pesticide man, the civil servant, all believed themselves to be honest because they defined their job in a narrow context from a sectarian perspective. Remember what we said. A sectarian believer judges everything, including morality, from the standpoint of his own perspective. But if you have a unified vision, you will be aware that there are other perspectives which must be taken into account, the way you do your job or run your business. These other perspectives are the health and safety of the consumer, the welfare of society, and the protection of the environment. When we do our jobs or run our business, we normally see it only from one or two perspectives. But if you have a unified vision, you've got to see it from the standpoint of the employee, the shareholder, the market, as the consumer, the whole society, and, not forgetting, nature, the environment. This is the unified vision which we need to have to be really honest in making a living. Lastly, let's talk a bit about unselfishness. To be unselfish means to take away the self. Just as to unbutton means take away the button. But how many of us can claim to be unselfish? Let's take the way our economic system is organized. If you were to ask the man in the street this question, why do you work? Most probably he would reply, I work because I want to make money for myself. Self-interest is the prime motivating force in our economic system. In economic language, it is called the profit motive. No doubt the profit motive is responsible for creating a lot of wealth in our society, but it is also responsible for creating a lot of corruption and dishonesty. Self-interest is the result of having a sectarian outlook, and in turn it reinforces that sectarianism. The interfaith perspective is that our economic system should not operate on the principle of self-interest. Instead, it should operate on the principle of social contribution. The purpose of working life is not to make money for ourselves. The purpose of working life is to serve humanity. Money should not be the goal of working life. Money is a payment which the worker gets to enable him to look after his various needs so that he can continue to serve humanity better and better. And business profits should be viewed as a resource to be invested to further improve the company's contribution to society. Personally, I would like to see the present economic system replaced by the Islamic economic system. However, I would like to see the Islamic economic system incorporate the teachings of other religions, such as Taoism, which is very strong on management. This brings me to another important aspect of unselfishness. If you are truly unselfish, you will be prepared to accept whatever is good and true in other religions. But what is happening in Malaysia is that most of the non-Muslim religious leaders have rejected the Islamic economic system for no other reason than it is Islamic. They have not even bothered to study the spiritual values embodied in the Sharia. In the same way, most of the Islamic leaders in Malaysia have ignored the teachings of the other religions, and many have gone to the extent of publicly stating that the scriptures of all the non-Muslim religions are not authentic. From the interfaith perspective, this antagonism between Muslim and non-Muslim religious leaders in our society is one of the most serious scandals in religion today. It is very sad when the leaders of religions are unable or unwilling to lead their followers to a state of unity with one another. In conclusion, I have said that interfaith is a concept of unity which stresses the oneness of all religions. I have said that interfaith is an orthodox tradition as it is one of the basic themes in every scripture. And I have also said that from the interfaith perspective, our standards of morality depend on whether we have a sectarian outlook or a unified vision. I wish MRA the best in its efforts to inculcate absolute moral standards in Malaysian and international society. Thank you.
Another very illuminating presentation by Joachim Ng. It gives me now very great pleasure to call upon Dr. V.G. Panikar, a medical practitioner in Petaling Jaya, to give the health perspective.
Good evening, friends of this Petola. I'm nearer the heavens. We, the medical people, do not have any problem whatsoever. Unlike the politician, the socio-economist, and the scientist, we have never changed our values with regard to man. We still look after him. Only our prices are a little more higher these days because of the soaring prices. Somebody once said the only way to bring down the price of articles is to put the price of man higher. Anyway, jokes aside, I consider it an honor to be invited to participate at this forum discussion on unchanging values in a changing society. The theme of this conference, in my opinion, underscores and underwrites the need for high ethical, moral, and spiritual values in the conduct of all human affairs, from the personal to the collective. In order to accomplish this, I believe love and realization is the master key that can help us to achieve this. A saint whom I love and respect for his wisdom had this to say: start the day with love, spend the day with love, fill the day with love, and end the day with love. That is the way to God. On this path, he informs us that you will never be waylaid with anger, lust, or greed. And it is said that if you incline towards the Supreme Being, in whatever manner we may address him, the passions that enslave you will be rendered powerless. Then you will do your duty, for you will love it with all your heart. Duty without love is deplorable. Duty with love is desirable. Love without duty is divine. I congratulate MRA, Malaysia in general, and Mr. Haridas in particular for all their love and painstaking efforts in the task of restoring the balance. Believe me, it is also a distinct and unique honor for me to be placed on the same pedestal as the other panel speakers, whom I admire and appreciate very much for all their writings. They are a living testimony to the fact that man is the highest, perhaps, in the animal kingdom, the very alchemy of creation. Speaking of man as the highest in the animal kingdom and as the very alchemy of creations, I am reminded of a story. This was another conference of this type which the animals held somewhere in the campus in the jungle. And the business was to decide on the authenticity and validity of man's claim. The Attorney General for the prosecution was the cunning and conniving fox, ably assisted by the jackal. Witnesses against were called
And there was a scathing attack on man by the tiger, the leopard, and all the animals. Man was berated, ridiculed, and his faults were listed. Particular mention was made of a number of features which the animals thought was an outstanding gap. One, the gap between the way a man lives and the way a man thinks. The second, that enumerated his inner force, anger, lust, greed, conceit, envy, hatred, which separated him from his fellow men. They also told about his religious beliefs without imbibing the spirituality of the religion. Another great fault. Even the dog, the man's best friend, also barked away and joined the tirade against man. A lamp-blasted man for his lack of seasons and reasons in his behavior. The case was nearly lost when the scorpion chipped in and said, "I have poison in my tail. Man has got poison all over him." Only the holy cow came to the rescue, and that too of a few people. Anyway, the presiding judge was the lion, the king of the animals. He said, "It's not so bad after all. There are some good men, just like the folks in MRA, who are organizing another conference out here." So basically, gentlemen, I think I have extolled on all the deficits that man have. But despite all that, while we laugh at it, we do realize within ourselves what are these eternal values. They come to you, whether you're a religious man or whether you're involved in the business of living and conducting your life, you will ultimately reach it by pure intellect and reason if you have not been helped and nurtured by your parents at home, by your religious beliefs. As far as medicine is concerned, the World Health Organization defines health as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely absence of disease or infirmity. The proper study, therefore, of mankind is man, for man is the center of things. Man today is the synthesis of all feelings, emotions, and reactions that arise in the mind. The mind is the seat of all urges and desires and thoughts. When the mind is clean, the world cognized by it will also be clean. When the mind is turbid and riddled with fears and anxieties, the world will appear miserable, depressing, and many people blame the world without knowing that the fault lies in themselves. A man cuts down the size of his living to the level of his compromise in life. Is a fact that must be consumed, digested, and realized. Now, it is therefore proper that we medical and health people try and understand what went wrong somewhere. Where did it go wrong? I believe the problem lies in the system of education of the human mind. From a medical angle, it takes an ovum and a spermatozoon to produce man with some genetic guidance. The gestation period is about the same. Man is similar in form. I don't look like an animal, do I? I don't sound like one, I know. Though we may chide ourselves by calling one another animals, we are indeed animals. Man is similar, therefore, in form, though he may differ in name, in race, in color, creed, and religion. He is born into this world in a state of helpless indigence. which is the entrance of all mankind on this their mortal existence. This inculcates the useful lessons of cause of natural equality and mutual dependence, and further instructs you in the active principles of universal beneficence and charity. Man's life can be reviewed as but a journey or a pilgrimage from birth to death, from the cradle to the cemetery or the crematorium, as you choose it. For this purpose of man's life in this world, he is endowed with three dimensions: body, mind, and intellect. In the highest sense, the body is the tabernacle of God. Otherwise, it's a device to contact the external and the phenomenal world of objects. To help man achieve this contact with this phenomenal world, he has got equipped in him 5 senses and also a locomotor ability, the ability to move. Our world is not merely a world of objects, it's also a world of events and happenings. It's a world of facts and fictions. Man also retains his primordial instincts, impulses and emotions like animals. But the most significant point about man, which we are trying to make a deep study of, hitherto the study has been confined to the religionists, but today the psychiatrists and the psychologists are making an intense study of understanding the mind. Man is equipped with a developing mind and a developing intellect. I put developing because it can be developed further. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that we are sprung from the same stock. As far as medicine is concerned, we are partakers of the same nature and sharers of the same hope. I will recount certain experiences about you as I delivered babies. From the cry, you can never decide whether the baby is Chinese, Malay. Even the baby does not know until he is told later on. So we are in the business of creating strife. So the child grows up with a personality. The child grows up with an individuality. We don't want that. We want to annihilate such potential personalities arising from our imparting of wrong education to them. We have been responsible for pitting people against one another. Now we can understand the world through two processes in education, the secular and the spiritual. The spiritual has been dealt with rather at length by Brother Joachim Ng. But the secular aspect concerns the non-self and the self. All the study of nature and science, which is but revealed aspects of nature, is non-self. All study pertaining to man, meaning health science, anatomy, I can give you n number of data in anatomy and physiology and biochemistry to convince you beyond a shadow of doubt that you and I are essentially the same. Essentially, in its essence. Now we also have a study of mental health. You must have heard of hospitals like Tanjong Rambutan and Nampoy and all that. They don't just admit lunatic people alone. It's not madness. It's a disease. It's a derangement of the mind which becomes rather obvious. It's a disease like any other disease. And we think the present state of affairs in the world is a disease. A diseased form of thinking. Now we also have sociology. But it's not possible for medical people to divorce from their minds the spiritual education. I believe that the education of human beings in society has been rather poorly conceived because of a belief that the goal of man is happiness. And we have divided them into two different compartments. One material happiness, one spiritual, itu yang lain. We must conceive it as a whole. And if our students are falling short and we have problems of dada addiction, I did not have that problem at the time when I went to school, and I don't think I had friends, whether they were good in their class studies or not, who dropped out or who were dada addicts. What has gone wrong? Our emphasis on education, it is for livelihood. We have not reconciled the two. And I think we must try and give weight to the fact that the purpose of education, ordinary education, medical education, any form of education, is to transform and not merely to inform. Now, there is one other aspect that I would like to touch upon, and that is factionalism within religion from a medical point of view. Because of time constraints, I'll have to skip. The factional fights and fanatic hatred are due to unruly ego that has been given free play. Religion strives to destroy just these vicious tendencies. So religion, in my opinion, has to be supported, not condemned. What has to be condemned is the narrow, perverted attitude of hating those who do not agree with you or who hold different opinions of the mysterious force that animates the universe. In that, I'm giving my 100% support to Brother Joachim. Religious wars and conflicts breed in the slime of ignorance and avarice when people are blind to the truth that the human fraternity, the human family is but one indivisible unity. Love alone, in my opinion, can convince man of this truth, that there is only one race, the race of humanity, one religion, love. What is love anyway? Love, as somebody put it, is the act of giving expression to our innate divinity. Since no religion upholds violence or despises love, it is wrong to ascribe the chaos to religion. The founders of religion had always in view the unity of all life and wanted to ensure the march of man from mere humanness to the heights of divinity. The problem has to be resolved in a re-education of the human mind and the ego that comes with it, with the individuality that we possess, the collective individuality of a race and the race ego, the collective individuality of religion and the consequent religious ego. All these have to be vanquished, obliterated, annihilated. And love, in its pure nectarine sense, has to be developed by all of us, sacrificing our ego at the altar of the highest truth. I know I've been asked here, invited to speak for a medical and health perspective, but this is what really constitutes health, mental health. I have been in practice for many long years. I'm grateful to God that I've not fallen sick. I know one day I might fall ill, but I think the most important thing is the mental resistance that we doctors generally offer